Do you really want to know why Trump has such diehard support and how people are so surprised that there's still a third of this country and more than a third that still vehemently support him? It is because he was so vilified for what he said about immigration and everything else beyond that. He riled the media up with what he said about immigration, and everything from beyond that point, the media treated as though it was from Satan himself, from the mouth of Satan himself. They vilified him so that they disenfranchised such a large portion of the country that they created what is Trump's support base right now. They created this. Hello everyone, my name is JD.
And this is Logan.
And this is the WireTap, brought to you by the Conservative Wire. And last week we took a week off. We had started school. It was just a lot of craziness, and we couldn't quite get into the recording booth to do anything. But this week, we are back with at least one episode. This will be the first episode. And I want to address specifically this trade war that's been going on with the United States and with China. And this has been going on. I was reading articles about this for the show. And this has been going on for almost 2 years. I didn't realize that. It's been that long.
It's been a while.
But
it's really begun to escalate within these last few months.
Yeah, in the last couple of months, it's really begun to escalate. Really within the last year, because the article I had read was actually from August of 2018, and it said that, today marks a year since this started, or it's been about a year. So August of 2017 is really whenever this started, which, whenever you think about it, Trump was put in office January of 17.
Yeah.
So, this has been an issue that Trump, for virtually his whole presidency, has been dealing with, by and large.
Mm-hmm.
This was an issue that he campaigned on. And if you look at his record for years, he has been pretty consistent on this issue of trade and with China and trade deficits and things of the like. Because we have, over 400 billion in trade deficit with China, which is the difference between our imports and exports. And that we're importing much more than we're exporting to China. And I think it's some 420 billion is what I seen in these articles. And this first one that I want to address comes from the New York Post, and this was from yesterday, Friday, as of recording, August 23rd. Rising tariffs, tanking stocks inside Trump's trade battle with China. And it says, President Trump on Friday ordered, and it puts this in quotes, U.S. companies to find an alternative to China for doing business after the country slapped more retaliatory tariffs on U.S. imports, sending the stock market into a tailspin. Our country has lost, stupidly, trillions of dollars with China over many years. They have stolen our intellectual property at a rate of hundreds of billions of dollars a year, and they want to continue. I won't let that happen. We don't need China, and frankly, we would be far better off without them, he wrote in a tweet storm. He continues, the vast amounts of money made and stolen by China from the United States year after year, for decades, will and must stop. Our great American companies are hereby ordered to immediately start looking for an alternative to China, including bringing your companies home and making products in the USA.
I hate how the media always portrays it as the stocks are plummeting and that the market is on the verge of collapse and recession.
And we saw a couple weeks ago, or it was just last week, I guess, whenever, the Dow was up and down all last week. It would go down a couple hundred points. The next day it would open and it would raise another couple hundred points. Because you had uncertainty with China, because China was really the big news of the week last week.
Yeah.
And then you also had uncertainty with the Fed and interest rates and, mumblings about that. So the Dow is just up and down, and it notes that this announcement sent the Dow into a nosedive that saw it finish 623 points down for the day. And the announcement was China saying that it would impose new tariffs on $75 billion worth of goods, United States goods, in retaliation for Trump's latest tariff hikes. The government said that it would increase import duties on U.S.-made autos and auto parts, and that tariffs of 10% and 5% would take effect on separate batches of U.S. goods on September 1st and December 15th. And specifically, it notes Trump saying they were supposed to have new tariffs that were starting on September 1st. And that was a postponement of tariffs that he was supposed to announce a couple weeks ago.
They put
a week or so
Yeah,
ago.
they put those tariffs back on.
Yeah, they put those tariffs back on.
It's like a 5% increase September 1st, and then I think it increases even more October 1st.
Well, and this is exactly what he said. This is what he tweeted anyway. Starting on October 1st, the $250 billion of goods and products from China currently being taxed at 25% will be taxed at 30%. Additionally, the remaining $300 billion of goods and products from China that was being taxed from September 1st at 10% will now be taxed at 15%. So it keeps escalating, and it's surprising to see the schism within the conservative movement and the Republican Party on this, because for so long you've had people, because we never really had to deal in modern American politics with tariffs, because virtually every president has had a policy of free trade, has had a policy of just open trade, no tariffs, and this has really never been an issue until now. And this is something that Donald Trump, for what it's worth, has been consistent on for much of his life. He has really always been a strong believer in using tariffs as a negotiating tool.
And what is so odd about this is how you've seen the free market conservatives turn in favor of this.
Yes.
You've had Larry Kudlow, the man that's made his career off of saying that he supports free market and that he hates tariffs, is now the man basically behind them.
Yes, and that was something that I specifically wanted to touch on, and that there must be something that he knows. There must be something that we do not know in this grand scheme of things that gets him on board, because you cannot take a man who has spent his whole life advocating for free market principles, one of which is the absence of tariffs in your trade policy. You cannot have that for your whole life, be advocating for that your whole life, and then on a whim reverse that position. It just doesn't make any sense. Even partisanship, I would not think would cause something like that, and I wouldn't think that Larry Kudlow would be the partisan type necessarily. He's not the, as we called before, the Fox News type conservatives. I expect this kind of crap from Karl Rove or Lindsey Graham or even Ann Coulter.
Yeah.
I expect this kind of stuff from them, to where anything that somebody says with an R behind their name is golden. And anyone who says anything with a D behind their name is the coming of the Antichrist. I expect that from those people. I don't really expect that from Larry Kudlow.
He hasn't had a very partisan career.
Yeah, his career has transcended just
He stood behind the principles.
Yeah.
His entire career.
He stood on the actual principles of the thing, which transcends just political expediency, political parties, and candidates. So there has to be something. In my mind, that's what I think. There has to be something that we don't quite yet know. If Larry Kudlow is in here, in the Trump team, in the Trump inner circle on this issue, and he is supportive of Trump's approach to this.
Yeah.
Now, there absolutely should have... This has been long overdue. This conflict on the trade deficit is long overdue because China has long been eating our lunch. They've been stealing our lunch money and eating our lunch for far too long on this trade deficit. We all know, and in fact, this is such a part of American society. You know, how many times have you heard, oh, well, it's probably made in China? Well, this is where that comes from. It comes from the fact that we only export some 100 billion of United States goods to China. I mean, approximate, some 100 and, X amount billion. And we import over 500 billion of Chinese goods to the United States. So that's where you get that about like $420 billion in a deficit. And like I said, that is it's become just such a part of our culture that we're just used to it by now. We're used to, oh, well, everything's made in China, you know. And that's where this comes from. This is long overdue. We've needed to do something about this for a long time. And Trump, for what it is worth, is at least trying to do something.
And this could be an issue that I expect will probably last into the 2020 election and might go past there, in all honesty.
I'm not too sure, to be totally honest, if this does not transcend the Trump presidency. I'm not so sure that this is not an issue that spills over into the next presidency. Because, as I've said, in my mind, Trump is already 8 years. If he loses in 2020, I will be very surprised. I will be very surprised if Trump loses in 2020. Because I do not feel, at least in my own mind, it does not feel like the stakes are as high as they were in 2016, just with media hype, you know?
Yeah.
It does not feel like as much is at stake here because I feel that Trump has been able to solidify himself, to be able to settle down and do everything, because what you really felt, what happened in 2016 is you felt that Trump was fighting quite literally against the world. You felt that Trump was fighting against everything. And he was so vilified from the word go. The reason why. Do you really want to know why Trump has such diehard support and how people are so surprised that there's still a third of this country and more than a third that still vehemently support him? It is because he was so vilified for what he said about immigration and everything else beyond that. He riled the media up with what he said about immigration, and everything from beyond that point, the media treated as though it was from Satan himself, from the mouth of Satan himself. They vilified him so that they disenfranchised such a large portion of the country that they created what is Trump's support base right now. They created this. And you felt like, if you were a supporter of his, that it was you against the world. Quite literally, because of what leaders around the world said about Donald Trump whenever he wasn't even president yet, whenever he was just a candidate. Whenever you had leaders in Europe and in Britain and Germany, all across the world, you had leaders saying things about him derogatorily.
And put aside the fact that you had the media, the people all around the world, the Democratic Party, you had the Republican Party.
You had the Clinton machine. You had everything against you. And that created the Donald Trump presidency. And I just do not foresee him losing in 2020. Now, let's bring this back around. I see this as an issue that might transcend the Trump presidency if it is not But there's still a lot of time. There's still potentially 5 years here that something could be figured out.
I feel like China, right now,
And
their economy is sort of struggling already. They've had, this year is on record the worst that they've had in 23 years.
yeah,
I feel like if this continues for the next 2 years and Trump continues to put the pressure on the next 2 years, right now I feel like China is just going to wait out until the 2020 election to see if Trump's going to stay. And if Trump stays, then I feel like a deal will be made within those 4 years.
the United States economy is still the number one economy in the world. China is number 2. If we really want to get into a war of attrition, the United States ultimately will win. But it is going to cost a lot. It is going to hurt while we're doing this. I don't foresee a tariff war like this going on for years on top of years, for 5 more years, until Trump is out of office. I myself just do not see that happening at the moment, at least in my mind. I don't think that that's necessarily the road that we're going down. But I wanted to get to just a piece, and this is what I was mentioning earlier, and I wanted to transition into that. This has caused such a schism among Republicans and conservatives and those who are free market, or have always claimed to be free market. We need to let the free market work things out. And that's great. Whenever you were talking about Barack Obama, your Fox News conservatives, whenever they were talking about Barack Obama and wanting to, run coal business, the coal industry out of business, those kind of comments, and you wanted to talk about the free market. And, you look at AOC's policies or Elizabeth Warren's policies or Bernie Sanders, and you're all about the free market.
It's a good talking point.
Well,
to get you through the interview.
Yeah. And tariffs are not really a part of that free market model, and yet you have some who are all on board for this. This is a piece from the Heritage Foundation. This is from earlier. In fact, this is already outdated information. This is from June 3rd of this year. And as we just mentioned, with these new things, these numbers are already outdated, but I want to bring them to you to show you just, maybe this isn't quite the most up-to-date information, but it gives you a bit of a picture as to where we've already been, because we've ratcheted this up. This is from before. It's worse now. We've increased rates. We've increased percentages now. So this is even bigger than it was on June 3rd. But really, this is the most recent piece, definitely from the Heritage Foundation, but just kind of outlaying how everything is being affected here. How everything is looking out, or what the outlook is for everything, and what it will affect, etc. So it talks about, here it says, one recent study found that the economic burden of Trump's 2018 tariffs fell mainly on domestic consumers, resulting in a reduction of U.S. income by $1.4 billion a month. If the tariffs were to remain at last year's rate, which they have not, as we now know, they've increased yet again, the average American household is expected to pay $770 in higher costs for every year the tariff remains in place. A follow-up study conducted by the Federal Reserve Bank of New York found that the tariffs would result in an average annual household cost of $831. That's a jump from $419 in 2018. Analyst Nian Su, a former chief economic advisor to the House Foreign Affairs Committee, projects a yearly cost between $800 to $1,000 per consumer, and it goes on and on and on. The additional 25% tariff hike on U.S. imports of Chinese goods has an annual monetary impact of $2,389 on a family of 4. So. And it goes on, and it says that there's an estimated 2.2 million jobs that could be lost. You have all these things. As we said before, if you want to pursue this, it can be pursued. If it's going to be a war of attrition, We will win eventually. But it will hurt. It will hurt. And we just need to be wary. And I've said this before on other issues. We said this about red flag laws. You have to remember, Democrats will eventually get back in power whether you like it or not. You will not always have a Republican president. You will not always have a Republican Senate. You will not always have a Republican House. In fact, there might come a time to where Republicans hold neither of the three positions that can be held in elective office. They might hold neither of the two chambers of the legislature or the executive. It's a very real possibility. And it will happen at some point where Democrats control all three like they did in 2008. That might be 2024.
Well, like you said, there will be short-term pain. There will be pain during this. I look at it, and though I don't have all the solutions, I also say, we can't keep digging ourselves into the hole that we're in with China.
Yeah.
You can't continue to go down this path for the next 30 years.
Yeah.
So something has to be done. Now, whether or not the tariffs are the best way, if you could find another way, I don't know. I'm not an economist. But
yeah.
Something has to be done.
There's a lot of people with a bunch of different solutions on how they propose to fix this trade deficit, and maybe in later episodes we'll address those theories. We'll look at them more in depth. This was more just designed to examine what's been going on and just look at the intentions of this and not necessarily the whole economic philosophy behind it. But as I was saying, eventually this isn't going to be the case. Like with red flag laws, you will lose at some point. And these kind of things can be abused. These laws and things like that, and these tariffs, and the Fox News conservatives and the people on the right who all of a sudden support this are going to be the ones who run back to the other side, on the other side of the day. And you have to remember to be consistent. You have to remember to look at it you have to look at it objectively, even whenever it is the person that you like who's in office, your guy who's in office. Whenever you like the person, you have to be just as consistent as whenever it's the person that you don't like. In fact, maybe even more so. You have to be more so critical. But with that, we want to thank you all for watching this edition of the WireTap, and make sure you can follow us on SoundCloud. You can follow us on YouTube. Make sure you guys leave a like, subscribe if you want to see more of our content. Make sure you follow and leave a comment down below of ideas that you want to see for future episodes and for things that you would like to see in the future here on the WireTap. So whether you watch or listen, we want to thank you for being with us. For Logan, I am JD, and we will see you in the next episode. Thank you, and God bless.